Book of Divinity, Chapter 9. Then God bewailed the state of the earth, because man ceased to love anything thereon. His whole mind and heart were set up upon heavenly things, and the earth was becoming like a neglected farm, grown up with weeds and briars. So Jehovah answered God's prayers, saying, Behold, I will bring darkness around about the earth on every side. See to it then, my son, for not only will man desire of the earth, but the angels in thy high heavenly places will forsake them and go down to the earth. 2. So it came to pass, Jehovah brought Jiah upon the earth, and it was in a state of darkness for 400 years, and the sun shone not, but was like a red ball of fire, and mortal things were without lights and shadows. 3. And men's minds and heart took after the nature of the corporeal world, losing sight of Ormuz and his heavenly promises. And they bethought them of the desires of earth, and of the pleasures of the flesh life. Now, during Jiah, there fell perpetual atmospherian substance on the earth, and it was of the nature and kind of substance of which the earth is made, but atmospheric, and this is that which is called Jiah. 4. And the plateau of Haraiti and Zeredho were driven down to the earth and near the earth. And the belt of meteors was moved nearer by thousands of miles, and meteoric stones fell in many places upon the earth, like a rain shower, but burning hot, and with suffocating smell. And the affairs of mortals were changed. They built new cities and became great hunters, applying the wisdom of their forefathers to the matters of the earth. 5. And the heavenly places of delight were broken up and descended to the earth, and the angels were cast upon the earth, turning away from faith in Ormuz, seeking joy in the affairs of earth. And God and his lords were powerless unto righteous works, either with mortals or angels. Then man and woman became prolific, and they grew large, and full of resolution and power. 6. The voice of Jehovah spake to God, saying, Maintain thou thy kingdom, and thy gods and thy lords under thee shall also maintain their kingdoms. Nor suffer thou my people to be discouraged with my works. 7. Because I have sent darkness upon the earth to benefit mortals in mortality, so have I also given my heavenly host lessons in my worlds. Nor shall they call this a judgment upon them, nor say, I do these things in anger, nor as punishment, nor for benefit of one to the injury of others. 8. Because thou wert guided by my voice and my commandments in bestowing the divine law, behold the strength and wisdom of thy pupils. For inasmuch as they learn to master the elements I created in atmospheria, so will they become triumphant in my ethereal worlds. 9. God perceived, and he and his lords and sub-gods fortified their kingdoms on all hands, and provided assistance to their colleges, factories, hospitals, and places of education in order to maintain the angels who had sought resurrection. 10. Nevertheless, it came to pass, many angels believed a new order of light was coming on the earth, wherein the earth would become the all-highest abode for angels and gods. Others, having lived 200 or 300 years in atmospheria, and never having been in etheria, began to disbelieve in the higher heavens, and finally to disbelieve in Jehovah also. 11. And in 200 years later, God and his lords lost influence and power with both angels and mortals, and the latter took to war, and the angels who had ministered unto them became wanderers and adventurers without organization, and cared neither for truth nor wisdom, but flattered mortals with their own glory. 12. And the kings and queens of the earth built temples for their familiar spirits, who assumed the ancient names of gods and lords. Now, when the next ark of Dan was near at hand, God enumerated his upraised host, and there were prepared as brides and bridegrooms for Jehovah's higher heavens 12,000 million. 13. And because it was less than the number of his predecessor, he cried out unto Jehovah, bewailing his weakness. And Jehovah answered him, saying, Bewail not, my son, thou hast done a great work. Neither ask thou that thou mayest remain another Dan, for the next will be not so fair a harvest. So God grieved no more, but bestowed his kingdom on his successor, and his lords did likewise. And so did his subgods, and all other persons having proteges. And God called together the brides and bridegrooms of Jehovah, and the latter sent down from Etheria 5 great ships of fire, and delivered God and his host into the emancipated worlds. Chapter 10. In the 1200th year after Phagapati, in the east colony of Haraiti, one Tusk, a former lord of Jehovah's host, renounced Jehovah, the Creator, and falsely proclaimed himself Ahura, the All-Master, and he took with him 3 lords of grade 88, and subgods of grade 64, and 1,600 students of 800 years resurrection, none of whom were less than grade 60, and were sufficient to pass as brides and bridegrooms. And these students took with them 36,000 teachers, factors, and physicians and nurses, all of whom were upward of grade 40. 2. And Ahura appropriated to himself one colony of 110 million angels, together with the colleges, schools, factories, and all things whatsoever belonging therein. And the 3 lords took their kingdoms, and by annexation made them part and parcel with Ahura's kingdom. Now these 3 lords' kingdoms comprise the largest habitable places of mortals in Vindhu and Japheth, and the greatest heavenly places of angels in the first resurrection. 3. And Ahura divided up the regions he thus obtained, making confederate heavenly kingdoms, sufficient in number to give place of dominion to his lords and gods, and to make subgods out of all the 1,600 students. And after that Ahura numbered his people, and there were in his heavens more than 3,000 million souls. 4. God sent messengers to Tusk, who had assumed the name Ahura Mazda, inquiring, admonishing, and inquiring. My Lord, whom I have loved, whom by mine own hands was crowned in the name of Jehovah, why hast thou deserted the Father's kingdom? Wherein hast thou had cause to complain against Jehovah? Wherein against me, thy God? O my son, my Lord, say not thou hast gone so far thou canst not return. What canst thou ask of me, that I will not grant unto thee? Nay, even judge thou me, and if thou desirest all the heavens and the earth in my place, I will abdicate unto thee, and become thy lowest servant, or whatsoever thou wilt put on me. 5. Ahura returned with this answer, to wit, Because I have nothing against thee, I have alienated myself and my kingdom from thee. I desire not the kingdom, nor even mine own. Behold, I looked upon thee, and thou wert pure and holy. I looked upon the kingdoms of heaven and the kingdoms of earth, and they were impure and unholy. Then came certain brother lords to me, most wise lords, and they said, A less pure God, a less holy God would be more efficient. So I was persuaded to my course. 6. God replied to this, saying, Behold, we have a diva. Why spakest thou not thus before me face to face? And thy 3 great lords were also divins, and they were silent on the matter likewise. The div would have decreed whatever was all wise, because I was in darkness. I saw not thy thoughts, nor thy lords, and ye have heaped shame upon me. How shall I send my record to Etheria? Shall I say, Behold, certain lords consulted clandestinely, and then concluded to overthrow the Creator? And forsooth, they have gone and set up a kingdom of their own, calling it the All-Highest. 7. Hear me yet, and I will endeavor to speak wisely unto thee. Thy messengers notified me some days since that thou hast repudiated Jehovah, saying, There is no All-Highest person. I can make myself high as the highest. And thereupon thy messenger gave me a map, saying, Behold thou, here are the boundaries of the kingdom of Ahura Mazda, the all-sufficient high God. 8. I looked over the map, and beheld its great extent, and I surmised to myself, He is a great God that can rule over all that, for I knew thee and thy education, which is as great as any lord's in Atmospheria. And thou knowest thou canst not control even a plateau. Canst thou raise thine hand and stay the Agi, or the Jaye, or the nebulae? Scarce canst thou change a single current of wind, nor canst thou cast a drought on any land. And yet thou knowest there are gods who can do these things by a motion of one finger. How darest thou, then, proclaim thyself an all-sufficient high God? 9. But I will not rebuke thee, for I desire thy love and thy help. I would win thee by any sacrifice I can make. Behold, there is a great darkness in heaven and on earth, wherein I may be short. I will rebuke myself in after ages. I pray thee then, return thou to me, and make exactions upon me and my kingdoms. With thy loss, behold, Diva is broken up. With thy dismemberment of heavens, others will follow. Alas, I will not look upon even that which my soul seeth. I plead for thy love and for thy assistance. Nevertheless, if the all-highest light, for the all-best good, showeth thee that thou art right, come not to me. I know the Great Spirit will sustain me, even though my soul is well nigh crushed to pieces by the loss of so fair a love. 10. To this Ahura replied, How came the thought to me to do as I did, if it be not the wisest best course? 11. God replied, Because of the long reign of Jaye, thou wert inoculated with darkness, even as a mortal on a rainy day loseth his patience to be wise. 12. Then Ahura sent the following, to wit, I have been patient in mine answers, but now I will speak plainly. First of all, thou art all pure and most wise above all other gods. For more than 200 years I have been a faithful Lord unto thee and thy kingdoms. At first the great light came to me, and a voice came out of the light. Then I feared and was awe-stricken, because I believed thee so near the Creator. Thine every word and act were to me worshipful. 13. At last I rebuked myself, saying to myself, Fool, givest thou worship to a man born of woman? Remember thy Creator only. 14. But the times changed. Jaye fell upon heaven and earth. Our glorious kingdoms were cast down by the great darkness. Then I reasoned, saying to myself, Behold, when we were in light, Jehovah's voice spake unto us. When the darkness came, the voice came not. We sat in the diva, in the altar circle, praying for light from the Father, but it came not. And I said, More we need the voice in darkness than in light. For 100 years we saw not the light of the voice, nor heard the voice speak. Thou hast said, Thou heardst in thy soul. Who is there in heaven or earth that cannot say as much? 15. In my soul I no longer believe there is an all person. There are great gods, 1,000 times greater than I, but there is the end. Yeah, some of those great gods may have cast the Jaye upon us, but that is not my matter. There is room for thee and thy people. Here is room for me and my people. 16. Jehovah spake to God, saying, Answer thou not Ahura more. Behold, I will interpret him to thee. He will even yet persuade angels and mortals that it was he who inspired Zarathustra. But he seeth it not himself. Suffer him, therefore, to go his way, neither take sorrow to thy soul. Have I not, from the lowest to the highest, given unto all men even that which they desired? Behold, I can use even bad men in the far future. 17. Jehovah said, For a long season Ahura was strived to walk upright, but because he hath cut me off, he will also cut himself off in time to come. Behold, a mortal man striveth for riches honorably, and when he is rich, his riches cut him off from me, by the ruin he casteth upon his competitors, nor can he extricate himself. Even so will it be with Ahura. His kingdom and his subkingdoms and his multitude of officers will cause him to enslave hundreds of millions of Judas, and they will draw him into a vortex from which he cannot escape. 18. So God answered Ahura no more, but nevertheless his heart was full of sorrow. Now, when the time of the meeting of Diva came, God foresaw that not more than one half of them would be present, and he feared the questions that might come up. 19. But Jehovah said unto him, Fear not, my son, for even though many more leave thee, yet shalt thou preserve the Diva to the end of this cycle. So it came to pass that Jehovah stilled the tongues of all the gods and lords of the Diva in reference to Ahura, even as if they had never known him. And Ahura sent quizzers to different gods and lords afterwards to learn what action the Diva had taken in his case. But when he was told that he was not he had not been mentioned, he became angered, and he swore an oath that he would build the largest of all heavenly kingdoms. 20. Because of the great darkness on heaven and earth, God sent hope and promise into all the kingdoms, urging his lords and his subgods to maintain faith, not only in themselves, but within the hearts of their respective inhabitants. Now, from the time of the succession of Ahura to the next Dan would be 300 years, and God knew this, though the multitudes in heaven and earth knew it not. And God commanded great recreations and extensive labors in order to prevent further dismemberment. But in the course of 100 years, many were carried away by the extravagant stories told by Ahura's kingdoms being places of great delight and of ease and idleness. 21. Ahura's lord said unto him, Thou shalt adorn thy kingdom, thy throne, and thy capital. Tusk shall be the largest and most ornamental of all places in the universe. And our subkingdoms shall be places of great delight. And Ahura was persuaded, and so began self-glorification, and his lords with him. 22. In another 100 years, Ahura had withdrawn and annexed unto him in heaven the following provinces, with their subgods: Ediasiv, with 70 million souls; Hawak, with 100 million souls; Hin, with 20 million souls; Dinayado, with 80 million souls; Erefravish, with 190 million souls; the whole of the kingdom of Gir-Akshi, 600 million souls; the whole of the kingdom of Sufwa, with 800 million souls; and all of these confederated in the lower heavens, making the kingdom of Tusk, with Ahura as Mazda in chief, the central kingdom. 23. The Diva was by this reduced to 7 members, but these remained faithful, and God kept up the standard of resurrection for yet 100 more years. And then Jehovah sent a region of Dan to heaven and earth, and the most high heavenly host descended in fire ships, and took God and his harvest up to Jehovah. And with all the misfortune that befell God and his lords, there were nevertheless 6,000 million brides and bridegrooms to Jehovah raised up to the higher heavens. 24. Now, when the Etherian host came for the resurrection, knowing the darkness upon the lower heaven and the earth, they sent Otivans with heralds and trumpeters around the earth, proclaiming the resurrection at hand, and asking all who chose to repair Maudu in Haraiti. And the word was whispered throughout Ahura's kingdom. What? Then of a truth there must be higher heaven than this. Alas, had we been faithful till now, we had been brides and bridegrooms. So potent was this disaffection for Ahura that 5 of his lords broke membership and reaffiliated with God and his kingdoms. 25. And thus matters stood when God's successors came to the throne. Chapter 11. The next span was 500 years, and God and his heavenly kingdoms prospered before Jehovah. But as to the Lord's kingdoms on earth, and as to mortal kingdoms and empires, not much light was manifested in them. 2. Ahura, who had thus falsely taken and was known by the name of Ahura Mazda, established lords to rule over mortals, and these lords were in direct opposition to God's lords, for the latter taught the higher heavens and the all-person Jehovah or Ormaz, according to the language of mortals. But Ahura's lords taught only one heavenly kingdom, which was Ahura's, called Tusk, the all-holy highest heaven. 3. God's lords inspired mortals to everlasting resurrection. Ahura's lords inspired mortals to Ahura's kingdom, and there the end. And since mortals have built temples for their priests, rabbis, who were gifted with Suis, the spirits congregated in the temples and oft appeared in Sargis, teaching openly their several doctrines. And the Ashars that labored for Ahura extolled the glory and the delight of Tusk, and the wonderful majesty and power of Ahura. But the Ashars of God's host inspired and taught of the Great Spirit, unapproachable. 4. For 500 years were God's host confronted with this opposition, and it came to pass that mortals, especially in Vindhya, were divided into two great classes of worshippers. And just before God's successor came into dominion, he propounded the matter in Diva, whereupon all the members spake at great length. Afterward, Div decreed. 5. Whatsoever is worshipped, having comprehensible form or figure, is an idol. He that worshippeth an idol whether of stone or wood, or whether if it be man or angel, sinneth against the Creator. This was given unto all of God's lords, and by them to the Ashars, and commanded to be taught to mortals by inspiration and otherwise. 6. When the time of Dan came, there were 7,000 million brides and bridegrooms, raised up to Jehovah's emancipated worlds, and the succeeding God and lords came into dominion under more favorable auspices, but which were not to continue long. 7. The Diva had extended to 14 members, and God's lords had succeeded in securing kingdoms in the principal parts of Japheth, Bindu, and Arabinia. On the other hand, the emissaries of Ahura, the false, had been most active in extending the kingdom of their idol. Ahura was most cunning with the last divine act. Instead of interdicting, he altered it, so it read as followeth, to wit, whatsoever is worshipped, having comprehensible form or figure, is an idol. He that worshippeth an idol, whether of stone or wood, or whether it be a man or an angel, sinneth against the All-Highest, who is personated in Ahura Mazda, the holy begotten Son of all created creations. 8. And next, Ahura determined to found a second heaven, decreeing to his emissaries as followeth, to wit, behold, Girakshi, the heavenly region belonging above the lands of Helest. Thither will I build a new heaven, greater than all other heavens, save Tusk, and when Girakshi is well founded, I will people it with many millions of mighty angels, gods and lords, and my host shall be descended to the corporeal earth, to the lands of Parsii and Arabinia, and they shall obsess mortals day and night, and inspire them to go to Helest, where they shall build great cities and kingdoms unto me and my host. 9. And when these things are fulfilled, behold, I will send up hosts to Europa, and build there also heavenly kingdoms and mortal kingdoms. And when these are established, behold, I will send into other countries, one after another, until my heavenly kingdoms embrace all the places, and until all the earth is mine. 10. For I will be God over all, and ye that labor with me shall be my lords and subgods forever. And my kingdoms and your kingdoms shall be bestowed with glories and ornaments, the like of which never was. Neither shall the gods of other worlds come against me or mine to carry away my people. They shall no longer flatter them, calling them brides and bridegrooms to Jehovah, a thing none can see or comprehend. 11. And Ahura and his emissaries set to work to carry out this decrees. And in 200 years they had inspired the Parsians and the Arabinians to emigrate by tens of thousands to the land of Helest, which was inhabited by drooks and wanderers full of wickedness. Ahura inspired his immigrants to fall upon the native drook and destroy them, wherein had come to pass that which Jehovah spake into Maudu, saying, they who cannot be risen by persuasion may be aroused by less scrupulous masters. 12. For whilst Ahura's hosts were slaying the drooks of Helest by tens of thousands, God's heavenly hosts were receiving their spirits and conducting them away to other atmospherian regions. 13. These then were the divisions of mortals on earth at this time. First, the Ihans, who were the original faithists, and they were capable of prophecies and miracles to such an extent that all other people call them the sacred people. Neither did the great warriors of other nations and people molest them. The Ihans lived secluded and separate from all other people. Nevertheless, they were the seed of everlasting life on the earth, and the foundation for raising up prophets and seers unto other peoples. Even as the mother of Zarathustra was of the Ihans, so was it with all men and women born into the world, with Suis and Sargis. For being near Jehovah, they had faith in him, and him only. The second race, equally ancient, was the Drooks, the barbarian hordes, incapable of inspiration, save for their stomach's sake. And though they were told 1,000 times, behold, ye have a spiritual body, they understood not, cared not, and forgot it a moment after. And though it were said to them, behold, there is a great spirit, they heard it not, nor understood nor heeded the words. The third race was the Ihwans, born betwixt the Ihans and the Drooks. To this race, in its early days, a commandment was given by God not to marry with Drooks, and they had maintained that law amongst themselves by the sign of the circumcision. This then was the first beginning of persecution against faithists in Jehovah. 14. When Ahura usurped his heavenly kingdom and appointed guardian angels over mortals, he determined to leave nothing undone in order to overthrow the doctrine of Jehovah, the All-Person. So he decreed as followeth, to wit, 15. Since by the mark of the circumcision they have pride in being faithless, I will not have circumcision. After the third generation, 100 years, whosoever hath this mark upon him is my enemy. He shall be pursued, and no prophet shall fall to his lot. Suffer not little children to be maimed for my sake. Rather let them be circumcised in heart. 16. And Ahura put no restriction upon his mortal followers marrying. And it came to pass that those Druks not slain in Helest married with the worshippers of Ahura. 17. And about this same period of the time Jehovah brought the earth into a light region for 200 years. And when the Diva was in session, Jehovah's voice spake to the Div, saying, Let my sons be not cast down because of the sins of Ahura. Rather, be ye wise and appropriate from his wickedness that which will be good in the end. For as it was not lawful for my people to marry with the Druks, behold, Ahura hath made a law on his own account against circumcision, and it shall come to pass that by their sins even Druks shall be raised up to learn of me and my kingdoms. 18. And it came to pass that a fourth race rose up in the world, and it was mongrel, being dark and short and less noble. The Ihwans were red and brown and tall and majestic, the Ihans small and white and yellow. And Jehovah put these marks upon his people, that the races might be read in thousands of years. 19. Ahura perceived this. One of his lords said unto him, Thou, Ahura, soughtest to disprove Jehovah in this. Ahura said, 20. Behold, there are two senses to all men, the S and the corpor. When one is in abeyance, the other acteth. This is suis. Call together thy companions and find a remedy, for I will prove all things in heaven and earth. 21. For 50 years Ahura and his host tried by other means to have born into the world a great prophet and seer, but failed. Ahura said, I know the way of the Lewis. They decoy the Ihan men to go with the Ihwan damsels. But I have sworn there is no Jehovah. How then shall I go to the sacred people? And after all, such a prophet might prove treacherous to my kingdom. So Ahura commanded his emissaries to weigh the matter for other 50 years, and them to solve the problem. 22. So Ahura's emissaries inspired thousands of experiments to be made, whereby a prophet or seer could be made amongst the mongrels. And Jehovah suffered them to discover that by pressing down to the front brain of infants, they could be made capable of suis. And infants were strapped on boards, and another board strapped on the forehead to press the head flat. And every day the headboard was strapped on anew, tighter and tighter, until the forehead, which holdeth the corporeal judgment, was pressed flat, and the judgment of the brain driven up into light-perceiving regions at the top of the head. 23. Ahura thus raised up prophets and seers, and they were willing instruments in his hands. And he sent into all the divisions of the earth tens of thousands of angels, teaching this to mortals, thus laying down the foundation for his grand scheme of reducing heaven and earth into his own kingdoms. 24. Jehovah spake in the Diva, saying, Even this permit ye. The Druks will heed more what one of their own people saith as a seer, than if the same thing were said 100 times over by an Ihan.